Welcome to the Nick Blevins Family Ministry Podcast. Our goal is to help you maximize your church's potential. You'll hear from top leaders in children's, student, and family ministry about the principles and practices they use. Now here's your host, Nick Blevins.
Hello and welcome to episode 237 of the Family Ministry Podcast, and we're going to talk with Phil Bell all about a family ministry playbook for partnering with parents. If you're a children's ministry leader, a student pastor, a next-gen pastor, you should care about partnering with parents. And Phil is a great leader who did this in ministry, in church for a long time. He actually wrote a book about it years ago and then rewrote the book because things change, right, when it comes to partnering with parents and ministry. And so that is what we're talking about here, is kind of the updated new version of the playbook. But what we really talk about is doing it. You know, where do you start and all that, because you can get the book and read it. So Phil and I kind of focus on just hearing his thoughts about it and his experience in ministry and all that. You can get the links and notes and everything at nickblevins.com/episode 237. The Multiply Ministry Conference is happening in 2 weeks and a day, I think, if my math is correctly. It's happening online. We have 30 speakers lined up. We've got some amazing voices all talking about how to empower volunteers in ministry. The first half of the event each day is going to be live, and then the second part will be time for you to watch some of the on-demand breakout content, so specific content for your ministry, or maybe it's specific content around recruiting volunteers or empowering volunteers or retaining volunteers or whatever that might be. And some of the live keynote sessions that you're going to listen to if you sign up for the free conference includes Josh Denhart talking about how to make more of yourself through volunteers, Justin Knowles talking about how to create a culture of candor among your volunteers, Ryan Frank's going to talk about structuring your team for growth, Jim Weidman's going to talk about raising the abilities of the volunteers you lead. And there's just so many great voices, more that we're going to announce next week. Michaela White is going to be one of the keynote speakers, Christine Kreischer, who we love, who obviously wrote the book on volunteer retainment. You're going to hear from her, and then we're going to announce another live keynote speaker next week. So if you're listening to the podcast or if you're on our email list, you'll hear about that. But there's no reason to do that, because just go to multiplyministry.org, sign up for your free ticket. It's happening Wednesday and Thursday, August 25th and 26th, 12 to 4 p.m. Eastern. But that live part is the first half, so 12 to 2 Eastern time on those 2 days. Make sure you sign up. We're going to love seeing you in there. We've got lots of other surprises in store for you as well if you sign up for that conference. But let's get to why you're really listening to this episode, which is to hear about partnering with parents. So let's jump in and listen to Phil Bell talk about a family ministry playbook for partnering with parents. All right. Well, today we've got my friend Phil Bell back on the podcast again. Welcome back, Phil.
Hey, it's great to be back, Nick.
And it's been a while. I had to go look, because I have no idea sometimes, especially you and I've had many conversations, and you can't distinguish between which ones are, on the podcast or just between the two of us. And it was episode 80, and that's a long time ago. Okay. So that's like 3+ years, 3.5 years. So give us an update for, anybody who didn't listen to that episode, which they should, by the way. Go back and listen to that episode. Introduce yourself and tell us what's going on in your life now. A lot has changed for sure.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Well, it's great to be back, and it's always a pleasure to speak with you, Nick. I love the ministry that you're doing, and you're really making so many great resources and opportunities available to other leaders. So thank you so much for what you do. I think since last time we spoke, there's been a lot going on. For me, last time I was on the podcast, I was in full-time ministry in a large multi-site church, leading the family ministry. And last summer, just as COVID was in full swing and we were getting used to a new reality, I stepped out of full-time ministry after 20 years. But my ministry is still happening, but it just happens to be in the form of coaching, consulting, and writing now. And so I'm coaching both leaders in the church and in corporations, and really, really enjoying it. And despite a great deal of uncertainty of taking those steps, especially in the season that we've all found ourselves in, God's just been a great at providing great opportunities for me just to continue to use the gifts and help churches and individuals in a variety of different ways. So it's been an incredible journey to look back on in this last year.
Yeah, I'm going to throw you a curveball. I don't know why I didn't think about this before we were talking before we hit record, but I got to ask the question: when coaching in like the business secular world and coaching church leaders, how much is there like an overlap? It's like the same, similar content versus how much is very unique to church ministry when you're coaching there.
Yeah, here's the great thing is the thing about coaching in particular is if you are really truly coaching as opposed to consulting, the goal really is to really listen intently to the leader that you're coaching and really understand where they're coming from and try to pull out of them the best solutions based on the resources and the things that they have around them. And so whether you're coaching someone in the church or whether in a large corporation or a small business, you really want to be listening intently, and that's so key. And quite honestly, at the heart of all of us, we're human beings, and so we've got a lot of the same needs, the same insecurities, the same wants. And so I think that is that makes an easier crossover, I guess, between the corporate world and the church world.
Yeah, sure. Well, that's because you do coaching that right way, right? Like a lot of
Right.
people don't do coaching that way, and you're really good at that. So I can see where you can do it with really any setting, probably,
For
but certainly
sure.
with leadership, kind of as a banner there, or
Mm,
even personal health and self care, like all that can
mm,
just apply across the board. Well, I didn't expect to
absolutely.
ask you that, but then when you had mentioned that, I thought, oh, actually, I'm curious now. I want to know. I want to talk a lot about your new release book, which is kind of like a re-release. You kind of rewrote about half of it. It's called the Family Ministry Playbook for Partnering with Parents. I mean, if this doesn't speak my language, I don't know what does, because love
Mm,
strategies and ideas for partnering with parents.
mm.
Love the idea of a playbook. One of the courses that we have with Ministry Boost that's mine is called the Volunteer Playbook. And by the way, that the original idea was a book 12 years ago. Still haven't finished it, Phil. Yet you've released this one and re-released a new version. So I'm very jealous of how productive you are with it. But tell us about kind of like the original book and then this new rewrite, the motivation behind some of the change, and then I want to jump in and talk about some of the content.
Absolutely, yeah. Well, I think just to take everybody back on a journey to about, sort of in the last 20 years of ministry, and I'm not going to take you through the full 20 years, of course, but really the reason why this book was written in the first place, sort of 6-7 years ago when I started on this journey to write it, was because I think as a young youth worker starting out, I knew I was meant to partner with parents. I was in an incredible college with a guy called Ben Freudenberg who wrote a book called The Family Friendly Church, which was at its time, 25 or so years ago when he wrote it, it was very much a groundbreaking book. And he was talking about the need to partner with the family. And when I read it, it really resonated with me, this whole idea of partnering with parents so that, we run our incredible youth and children's programs. And at the same time, we're coming alongside these parents. And when we partner together, we're more effective. And that just resonated with me. And of course, it makes sense, right? But the problem was, if I'm honest, there was two challenges for me. One is I grew up outside of the church, and so quite honestly, I'd never gone on that journey or seen really well from my parents, what it meant to invest in someone's faith journey. So when Lisa and my wife and I, got married, trying to even think about having kids and raising them and investing them in them, I had no idea how to do so. And so the idea of investing in my own kids' faith journey was foreign. And then secondly, I knew how to do youth ministry and I was learning how to do youth ministry. And most of what I read and, thought about were just thinking about running incredible programs and trying to create incredible messages and trying to create incredible environments and experiences. And if I'm honest, even though in the back of my mind I had Ben Freudenberg constantly speaking to me, I really wasn't doing a great job of it. And so I think I probably got about 5 years into ministry, maybe 6 years or so, and I was seeing some good fruit. But I was watching kids graduate from high school, and you're reading these statistics about kids, graduating from their faith altogether, and I kept hearing that, and it was just something I couldn't get away with, and so. I decided to kind of start this journey of just asking more questions to people like Ben Freudenberg, going back to the basics and trying some things and quite honestly failing at a lot of things and trying to learn how to be a parent myself, and just really trying to take some risks, I guess you would say, in partnering with the family. And as I did that, God helped me to learn a lot from my successes and failures. And we started to see in the ministries I was leading some really great fruit of partnering with parents. So when I decided to write this sort of 6-7 years ago, I was probably about 13 years into the journey, and I felt like it was time for me to start sharing some things, because a lot of my conversations with people were, okay, I know I'm meant to partner with the family. I know I'm meant to come alongside them, but practically speaking, what does this look like? And so I felt like it was time for me to write down as much as I could and get this out here just to be useful to people who are trying to do the same thing. And so that's where that first round of that book came out of.
And that's I would say this topic specifically. A lot of topics actually within children's and student ministry, there's not a lot of resources on. But partner with parents, I mean, gosh, most leaders I talk to that are in family ministry or children's ministry, student ministry, they want to do this well, but there aren't a ton of resources. So that's great that you put that, the book together back then. I mean, I remember when I searched, I think that's how I first learned of your book years ago. It was a quick search on Amazon. And it's like, okay, yeah, there's not much here. You've got what Phil did, maybe a couple other resources, certain curriculum publishers maybe have a thing or two, but it's not like other topics, even in the church world where there's a lot of content about it. So tell us about kind of the rewrite, you and I were talking, and it feels like about 40 to 50% of it's new. What did you update and really why? Like, what do you think has changed in the culture and context and partner with parents that needed to be updated in the book?
Yeah, it's a great question. So I think it's like everything, our culture is changing as we speak. And I think, even in this last year, we've had this amplification of change in the way families live and breathe and how they interact actually with the local church. And, just in this last year, it's been a massive change. But I felt like, sort of fast forward, 5 or 6 years from writing, I think there was a few things that happened. Number one is, you've got a lot of culture change, a lot of changes in the family. The makeup of the family continues to change. And so I wanted to address that. I wanted to talk about the different types of families that we see, even more so. I wanted to talk about the different types of parents that we see and how they interact. We used to talk about helicopter parents, but now, there's parents that are out there that, I describe as lawnmower parents. They don't just hover over their kids. They lawnmower, they steamroll through their kids' lives sometimes to better make sure that everything's perfectly taken care of in their kids' lives. So a lot of the parents that we see are quite different. The things that they worry about, the things that keep them up at night are different. So that was changing. And quite honestly, there was a continued evolution for me personally. I think that you look back and you can see some things that work really well. And if I'm honest, there's probably some things in that first rendition of the book I'm thinking, yeah, they worked okay, but they didn't work well, and people deserve better. And I wanted to better speak to some things maybe that didn't work as well and put those things right and provide some better context, some better ideas, and better direction for people. So I wanted to make some changes there to improve what people would, be provided in terms of specifics of how to truly partner with the family.
Now, I have the original version of the book, but I'm not holding them side by side with the new version. And so maybe this was in there, maybe it's new. But I want to hit some of the points of the book because I want people that are listening to be able to walk away. One, I hope they'll get the book, obviously. But I want people to be able to get some elements of what does it take to partner with parents? What is part of the playbook? Like, what's part of the strategy that every church should have? But I want to start with your approach to it because I think it's different than what most people would think. You kind of start with us, with ourselves as leaders. Again, I don't know if this is new, but instead of just, even my first thought would be, okay, let's create a plan. You know what I mean? In fact, I would tell you when it comes to this topic, I remember years ago, we just had to evaluate all the stuff we were doing, and that helped us figure out what our strategy was. We were not smart enough to come into it with like, oh, let's develop a strategy. Okay, here are all the pieces. Okay, now let's get all the tactics underneath of it. No, we threw stuff at the wall to see what stuck over years and years, and then later we're able to look back at it and say, actually, this could all be a strategy if we're a little more, intentional about it. But I didn't, nowhere in there did I think, okay, let me start with me. So tell us about that. Is that new in this version? And what's your focus there?
Yeah, so I think, the aspect of it starting with you is that's still, in order, from the previous version. I wanted us to start with you. Some of the stories and some of the issues that I face, some of the things I talk about are certainly different. A lot of the content there is different in terms of just my journey of what I've experienced. I think when I first wrote the book, quite honestly, I'd experienced certain things and maybe I thought I'd overcome some challenges personally. But when you look back over 7 years, you realize, oh, I haven't, and there's still some things for me to learn. So I think, quite honestly, in that particular chapter, there's probably some more candid examples of how I was struggling as a leader myself. So I wanted to be a little bit more authentic with people and just let people know, hey, you're not alone on this journey, but it certainly does start with you. And a point I really wanted to make in this particular chapter is that our ability to partner with the family, the best foundation we can start with is thinking about how God is going to work in and through us. If He's working in us in a powerful way, He's certainly going to work through us. And to your point, yeah, typically the way we start out is we think about, what programs can we run, what classes can we create, what resources can we create, what stuff can we send out, how can we communicate? And those things are all really good things. But if it's not founded on a solid, honest relationship with Jesus, it will come crumbling down quite quickly. And so I want to make sure that before we start creating all these great strategies, let's start with who we are. Let's take a good look in the mirror. Let's allow God to come into the innermost areas of our lives, and let's get real honest. And let's build on a foundation of authenticity as leaders. And when we stand in front of people, people will detect, or they will pick up, they will see, they will sense something in you that is authentic, that is real. And it's that they will want to follow. And the problem is, if we don't take the time to allow God to work in and through us, a lot of the time they don't see that, and they miss that crucial part of who we are. And I think people need to follow people that are real, authentic, and are on the journey with them and are in the trenches with them. And that's why it's so important to start with ourselves first.
Yeah, you talk about some of the traps that we can fall into. When I read the list, I mean, I'm going to read some of this right here so everybody else can share my pain. Because you get like it's a look in the mirror, right? You have things like we focus on pleasing people.
Yeah.
We build platforms. We mistake our identities. Gosh, that's a huge one, right? Like that our identity is wrapped up in our job and our church and our ministry and not what it should be. We break boundaries. Another big one. We lose our devotional lives. Another big one. And I think from the outside, a lot of times people would think, you work for the church. I mean, it must be a big boost to your devotional life. But man, how many people do I talk to? That's not the case at all. It's the opposite. Like you say here, we ignore worship. We aren't fully present. So tell us about a little bit of those. I mean, read that list. It's like need to fix some of those, get back in, work on myself.
Right, absolutely. And hear my heart for anyone who's listening. I want you to hear this first of all is, this is a list that I've written from experience personally. There's nothing on this list that I haven't struggled with and try to work through and have to quite candidly, frequently revisit as well. So it's more of a way to just allow ourselves to be honest. And I think when we can see those areas in our lives and then bring those to God, that's when He can work, in our lives. And God loves us so much. He wants to shine His light of love down into our lives and expose these areas so that He can work on these areas. But yeah, I think that one of the biggest challenges I do see for people that work in the church is we want the world to be a better place. We went into ministry because we wanted lives to be changed. We went into ministry because we want to see kids and students come to know Jesus and walk with Him and navigate through the toughest things in life because they've got this strong faith that they've developed. We want all those things, and we want to see people happy and joy-filled, and there's nothing wrong with our love for those things. But sometimes what can creep into that love and that desire to want to see the world be a better place, what can creep in is this idea of keeping everybody happy and people pleasing, and whether it's, that you're trying to keep your boss happy, whether it's your pastor or whether it's your director, whether it's you trying to keep parents happy because they're criticizing your program. And candidly, if you're a youth worker or a children's worker, I've experienced this where we want to keep our kids and students happy, and their comments and their critiques are just absolutely gut-wrenching sometimes when they happen. And so before we know it, we are in this cycle of just trying to keep everybody else around us happy, and we end up becoming quite miserable. We say yes to everyone and everything. And in the church world, I just want to say this, we often feel ashamed of saying no to something or someone, feeling like you can't possibly do that if you're called to serve people. The problem is we only have so many hours in a day, we only have so much bandwidth. And so I think people pleasing is one of the biggest issues that we see. And then the second issue that I mentioned is just building platforms. It's not always the fault of the speaker or the pastor or the celebrity Christian that's out there. A lot of the time they've been put on a platform, they've been called by God to deliver a message, but we often put them on that platform, don't we? And a lot of the time, I think as Christians, as youth workers, as children's workers, as family ministry directors, a lot of the time we look at certain people at conferences, we read books and we hear about people's lives, and before we know it, we're going down this slippery slope of thinking about ways in which we can create that platform for ourselves. And before we know it, pride starts to creep in. So I think people pleasing and building platforms for ourselves are two of the biggest issues that I see, and quite honestly, I've experienced. And when you allow those two things to happen, they can come crashing down on you quite quickly.
Well, gosh, I don't know if that's ever been more true in recent years than right now in the midst of COVID still, where protocols and rules and laws keep changing. We just had big conversations in our team this week because there's a major shift in policy and things like that. And what does that mean for the church? And, sure enough, there's going to be people upset on both sides. So if you're in the game to please people, you're losing every week. You were losing before. You're really losing now.
Absolutely.
So it's good to be grounded in the right things so that you're not chasing all that.
Yeah.
That's good.
And here's what I would say is, the rest of the list that I provide, and some of you have mentioned, I think they often come from those two things. You people please, you platform build. And with that, you end up mistaking your identity. You end up breaking boundaries with your family. You're saying no to your family more than you're saying no to the ministry needs. And, before you know it, you're struggling yourself, your family's struggling, and you're in a world of pain. And, I remember just a few years ago, one of my team who I loved, just working with because she was so creative, had a gigantic heart for her ministry area, and that she was fully committed. And I always used to say to my team, hey, I need you to take care of your family. I need to take care of your own spiritual walk. And she said to me one day, she said, look, I really appreciate how much you're always challenging us to take care of our own walk with God and taking care of our own families. But I've got to be honest, I've been watching you recently, and I don't see you doing it yourself. And I always see you like working too hard or working extra hours or doing this or doing that. And I'll be honest, it was a punch to the gut, but it was what I needed to hear. So, if you're listening to this podcast today and you're sort of thinking about some of these things, this might be a bit of a punch in the gut as you're thinking about these things for yourself. But again, God doesn't want you to stay in that place. He wants you to be transformed. And it's not until we can be honest and be real about these things that we can actually really start to change. So, anyone who's listening, don't be discouraged, be encouraged that this is part of God's plan for you to be transformed by him in these areas.
I'd love to hit a couple of the kind of the big principles, and really it's kind of like they're the chapters in the book in some sense, because you talk about some of the different elements of what I would call a good strategy to partner with parents. I just have to start here, though, even though it probably doesn't make any sense because it's later in the book, and it's not exactly where you'd start with building. I don't know. It just stands out, maybe even more now than ever. But it's chapter 7, equip disengaged parents, which we all know what that's like. But even the subtitle, how to train and equip parents when they won't even show up. That there's an amen being heard from
Yeah.
all the people listening to the podcast right now.
Yeah.
And again, this is even more different in the midst of COVID, because like some of these families may not even be attending in person still at church. And so what is that? But even when they were, what percentage showed up to different things? And tell us a little bit about what you talk about there that church leaders should hold on to when trying to partner with parents.
Yeah, that's a great question. And I'll be honest with you, anytime, I speak on partnering with parents, anytime, I'm speaking one-on-one at a coffee shop with someone or speaking to someone at a church, or whether it's speaking at a conference, the number one question I get is, how do you reach disengaged parents? And, I talk about this in the book. I wish I could say there's a magic bullet to success when it comes to dealing with disengaged parents. But, quite honestly, it is not a magic bullet, and it is a grind and a continuous intentional process of doing some specific things. And so, if we want to equip the disengaged parents, as a coach, this is one of the things I've been learning over the years, is that you will capture people's hearts and you will lead them on a journey when you are intently finding ways in which to listen to them. And so listening intently is probably the number one thing. And listening is not just about, having a conversation and listening and trying to understand who they are. Listening is active. And that means going to the places they are, seeking them out in the places that you're going to, find them in, and then trying to engage them, on their terms in their places, and not expecting them to show up to something that you're doing. And so, it is simple as, if you are, a youth worker and you're showing up to a soccer game, you're showing up to see that student play soccer, but, you should be looking for opportunities to, partner to parents by actually, listening to them and talking to them and asking them how they're doing, and starting just a regular conversation with them about, what their life's looking like, how their kids are doing, what are some of the things that they're excited about, what some of the things they're struggling with. So I think it starts with, getting in the trenches with parents and finding ways to meet them on their terms. But when I talk about listening, I've got a great friend, Chris Sasser, who by the way, has got a great book. He's got a stellar book that's going to be coming out in the next 6 months here, and you should really get him on your podcast when you get a chance. But Chris Sasser has got a question he asks parents all of the time. He says, I want to partner with parents because I want to come alongside you. Your job is challenging as parents. And we say that we are here to partner with you so that you can be more effective at home. But when we say that we are here to partner with you, what does that need to mean to you as a parent? And so when you're dealing with parents that maybe are disengaged, when you ask them that question of what does partnering with parents need to mean to you, or what does it mean to you, that's when we should lean in and listen. And so if you want to reach them right where they are, ask them to define for you what they need, and let that be your starting point. So that's probably the first step, is listening well, going to where they are, but then strategically asking that question of what does that need, what does that mean to you? What does that need to mean to you? So that's where I'd say would be the starting place.
Well, listening is definitely, a great starting place. And I'd be curious if you do enough of that. On one hand, you could just do it with whoever you can talk with and just serve them well. And it's not this big 30,000 foot level strategy with a whole process and all this stuff, but you're just serving and pastoring people well. On the other hand, you do that enough, you probably do figure out, wow, most people mention this, or a lot of people say this, or whatever it might be. And then now you've got, something specific that you can lean in on that is big picture and can help a lot of people. I think that's a great idea.
Yeah, and that's really simple, but and a lot of people could be listening to this and be thinking, well, that's not rocket science. I could have thought that up. Man, I'm going to go write a book right now about listening to parents. But the reality is in my fast and furious pace in the church ministry world, I would often find myself creating programs and creating resources, but actively listening and searching out and finding places to actually go to talk to parents was not something that was always on my schedule. And it wouldn't, you could see that my schedule didn't reflect the need to listen. But when you start to listen, it leads you to your next step, which is to then start to address the concerns of the parents, or to when they tell you, well, partnering with parents, for me, I need to figure out how to help my kids with technology. I don't know what's going on. And, my kids are already having a train wreck with using technology. We're already having issues. I need to understand how to do that. Listening to parents and addressing their concerns might be, we're now, we've come out of lockdown, but we've been doing this homeschool thing. We've discovered all these issues. I'm trying to find, ways in which to engage my kids differently. How do I do that? That might be an issue that pops up just because you listen. So taking what you've heard and then creating either resources, creating an article, pointing them to articles, pointing them to resources based on what you've heard is probably the next step of addressing their concerns. Is probably the next thing I would say that you need to do once you've heard that.
Yeah, that's good. I don't know if this is intentional. You'll have to tell me, but you talk about milestones as one of the chapters, point to important milestones. And I do think some of the best family ministries that I've known of, yours, Chris Sasser's be another good example. They do this. They do this well. But it's interesting when I talk to other leaders about it, or especially if we're talking about a full plan, kind of from scratch or whatever. I do think of this. There's a couple pieces I think should be in early on. I think baby dedication, some things like that. But then there's a lot of pieces of it that I think are really good, but they're not. I would say they're near the end of the plan for me, or they're not the highest priority, right? So, and again, I don't know how many, even if there were 15 parts to a good plan, a good strategy to partner with parents. These are in there, but it's more like in the 10 to 15 range, not in the top 1 to 5. And you have it kind of near the end of the book too. Again, I don't know if that's intentional, but talk a little bit about that, where you think that falls, and I guess part of it for me is you only have so much time. And you worked in a large church. Chris Sasser works in a large church. And I do think there's just something too, when you're in a larger church with more staff, you can eventually build something and then put more energy here. Whereas, and again, it's not all about church size. Some of it's just about time and priorities. So what are your thoughts on the milestones? How important do you think that is? Is it lower? Is it later in the book because you think communication and some of that is more important, or what do you think there?
Yeah, I think when you look at the book, the way that it's structured is really to sort of they are intentional building blocks. I wrote this book so that if you are, whether you're in a big church or whether you're in a smaller church, whether you're really well resourced or whether you feel like you're under resourced, I wanted people to be able to pick it up and apply it to their context and apply it to their situation, and not feel like, oh, now I've got to take this whole big plan and I've got to try to, put it into the framework of what my ministry looks like currently. I wanted people to be able to take, the building blocks and be able to say, oh, I can implement this. Okay, I've started with me. I'm building a unified team around me. I'm casting biblical vision to both parents and the leaders. I'm trying to now build a communication framework and communicate strategically with the parents. I'm going to start providing, resources to them so that they can, be helped at home now that I'm communicating things to them and they're starting to open, some of the communications. They're starting to interact with some of the communications. Now they're going to start looking at some of the resources. And now I can start to really address their concerns, disengaged parents. So it kind of builds like that. And then, walking through sort of how it fits into your intentional ministry strategy is probably the next thing. And it's then that you can maybe think about, if you haven't got some milestones really built in, most people have, whether it's dedication or baptism, some of these faith milestones, but what are some of the additional milestones you can have? And so what I didn't want to do is overwhelm people too early on with this whole idea that you've got to have these big milestones built in, because quite honestly, if you don't have these other building blocks in place, forget the milestones. If you're not communicating well, parents aren't going to even know about what milestones are. If you haven't listened well enough to them, they're not even going to care about the need for milestones. If they don't understand the vision, who cares about milestones? So that's kind of the reason why it's at the end of the book here. But at the same time, to your point, it's so important that we come alongside kids in these important faith and life milestones that they go through.
Yeah, and I get some of what you said there is probably how I have thought about it. If you have a good milestone, but your weekly communication, monthly communication stinks, I mean, that's great, but it's like one good thing in the midst of a mess, you know what I mean, or
Absolutely.
whatever. But then,
Yeah.
at the end too, you talk about helping families out in hard times, and you talk about building a support team of parents. I mean, those are things you could do right away, before you're building any other more complex parts too. So I know it's not like there's not like an order to it, but I feel like that's one of the things that you struggle with, or most leaders would struggle with, is you can do so much, and this entire thing, if we're honest about it, partnering with parents, we know the importance, but it's not due weekly. Like it's not the service this Sunday. It's not the kids ministry program. It's not my Wednesday night student thing or whatever. And so it already gets like what I would call the smaller piece of the pie of our time,
Right.
And so then if you take that smaller piece of the pie and you're like, wow, this fully developed, parent partnership strategy has 12 pieces to it. Holy cow.
Yeah.
Like, how am I going to get there? I could see, I want to help leaders prioritize and not feel bad about it. You know what I mean? Like, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that.
Right.
Everything else is on hold. Oh, good, we're doing this, and there's more time.
Yeah.
Okay, we're add number 3,
Yeah, absolutely. And I think this is it. And I think that, every church is different. And again, as a coach, my job is not to come in as a consultant and try to, say this is how you need to do it. Every church is different. Every leader is different. My job is to be able to just hold up, here's some things that you can do. Now, given your context, what is the best first step for you? But I definitely would say, I want to address this kind of tension that you're kind of raising, which I've always felt, in 20 years of church ministry, is the weekend's always coming. You've got emails to respond to, you've got programs to create, you've got messages to create, you've got curriculum to adjust. You've got all these things on your list of things to do. So to your point, it's like, goodness me, there's all this other stuff I could do for partnering with parents. I would say to people, like, if you were to pick up this book, if the only chapter that you would read would be, chapter 4, chapters 1 and 4, I probably would say, the need for partnering with parents, as well as the biblical vision for partnering with parents. When you can lean into those 2 chapters and really see what is at stake long term, and if you can lean into those chapters and really see the fruit of what will come if you can truly partner with the family, it will make you step back. And whether it's incrementally, creating a piece here and a piece there as you go and building slowly, or whether you want to change the world in a day, and I wouldn't recommend that, by the way, I think you would start to see that you will adjust your priorities. You will adjust how much energy and how much time you're putting into certain things. And you will start to create a team of people around you. And a lot of them can be parents. One of the best ways that you partner with parents is to create a team of parents around you who are a unified team going after the same things, who are doing things with and for you. And I think you will start to see more fruit from that over time. So I think the tension is, Nick, is that, yes, there's a lot to do, but there's so much at stake if we don't step back and start to build the right foundations to really truly reach the parents, to reach the grandparents, to reach the uncles and aunts, whoever is raising the kids at home. There's so much at stake with that I think that you've got to hit pause and step back a few steps to do it well. So that's probably me and my soapbox a little bit there.
I agree with you, though, because I think part of it's like, the other things are urgent and they're due every week. But and I'm not even talking about something big, like, a whole milestone strategy, but even just helping in hurting times or listening to parents, like you're talking about, something like that could be 100x impact of that thing you spent your time on that was due that week. Now, in a year, that'll be a big impact too. And so that's where it's not either or. But I totally agree with you. It's like you got to find time to do both. I've had a number of conversations recently just with people who were looking to either hire a next-gen family pastor, meaning somebody who oversees, kind of babies all the way up through high school or college, or they are considering going into one of these roles, like they're a youth pastor considering to do this or whatever. And I always say, man, one of the biggest benefits is you can put a better focus on this. Because not all the time, because sometimes you're kind of wearing, you know how it is, you wear like 8 hats, and so you can have more weekly things due. But sometimes if you have the right team, volunteers or staff, you can be a little bit free from that whirlwind of the weekly production or whatever, and you can spend more time on this. And man, that is gold. But everybody can do it. It's about, okay, how can I dedicate the time? How can I, hold myself accountable to it? How can I bring other people along? So it's not just me. And I just appreciate you writing this book a second time. The same first time it was the same thing. It's like you've given people a good playbook as it's described, so that they can go do this in their church. And my recommendation would be, don't do it alone. Get some people. If your church is large, you got multiple staff, great, get them in. But for most churches, get some volunteers, some parents, and kind of create a team. It's going to put this into action. And people will do it different, right? Some will prioritize this and some will prioritize that. But I think that'd be a great way to go. How can, as we wrap up, how can people, get a copy of the book? Should they just go to Amazon? And is there anything else you'd want to add in here before we close?
Yeah. I just think, just to wrap it up, I think there's one thing I'll add to what you just said, just to piggyback on, and then, it's you can get this on Amazon, so just go to Amazon, or you can get this on directly from Randall House Publishing as well. So those are two places. But yeah, I would say that one of the things that is going to be crucial for all ministry workers when it comes to partnering with the family is making sure that, first of all, you're captured by the vision and the need to do it. And so I would say that, reading this book, I think that, hopefully you come away realizing the need to do it. But one of the things I really wanted to do in this book was to unpack how you can talk to your church leadership about it, and how you can cast biblical vision for partnering with parents. Because I think one of the tensions is a lot of people are hired in to run programs and to get things done on a week-to-week basis. And they feel like they, especially if you want to keep your boss happy, and going back to that people-pleasing thing, sometimes it's not easy to kind of take your foot off the gas, it feels like, with programs. And sometimes it feels like you're slowing down too much to build that team that's going to be that foundation for partnering with the family. And people sometimes need permission to do that. And a way that I think we get permission to do that is we cast biblical vision with our church leadership and the people that are leading us, and we spend time influencing and talking to them about the need to do a really robust family ministry program that's going to really have both great programs, but also this foundation of partnering with the family. And I think when our church leadership can get on board with that, when we've sat down and talked to them about that vision, when we maybe don't seem to be doing programs maybe in exactly the right way, we can often come back to, well, I want to remind you, but we're also trying to do this thing over here, which is allowing us to partner with the parents as well. There's always going to be that tension of how well do we do programs and how well do we partner. But if they're bought into the vision, they're going to come along and support you. And sometimes they'll live in that tension a little bit more with you. But if you don't cast that vision for them, they're just going to be looking at your programs as your fruit. They're going to be looking at the outcomes and the metrics of how many kids you're running and stuff like that. And if that's all they're looking at, that's going to be a hard road for you. So I would say your life is going to be easier as a ministry leader to partner with a family if you've got the tools to how to communicate with your church leaders in casting that biblical vision for partnering with parents.
Yep, that's great. I'm so glad you have modeled this. I know from our conversations and knowing you over the years that you did lead this and you led it well. And there are not many churches that have had a good, effective strategy for partnering with parents over a long haul, and you have done that. And so I'm glad you put it in a book too to help others, and then rewrote it, with the new context, new culture, and updated the content to make more sense. I would encourage everybody to get the book, obviously, and anybody. I know we didn't talk a whole lot about this part, but anybody who's looking to get coaching, especially the kind that you do, where it really is coaching me, not you just teach me a bunch of stuff, but I'm talking with you and you're listening and you're helping me be a better leader and make better decisions and get things done the way I want to and all that stuff. I'd encourage them to reach out to you. How can they do that? How can they connect with you, follow you on social, all that?
Yeah, so we follow them on social. I think if you search Phil Bell and ministry or something like that, I'm sure you find me. But probably the best way is to go to. I've got a website. It's called philbell.coach or philbell.me. It goes to the same place. So those are two places to find me. And then Instagram, Mr. Phil Bell is my Instagram, and I think Twitter is just Phil Bell. So yeah, look me up, reach out. I love coming alongside leaders, even if it's to brainstorm, just to have a quick chat, even if it's not formal coaching. I love, and it's my joy to come alongside church leaders. So please reach out to me.
Cool. Well, Phil, thanks again for coming back on the podcast, talking about partnering with parents, which is kind of what we talked about a little bit before too. So again, I encourage people to go back and listen to episode 80, but thanks again for the time.
Thank you so much. I appreciate the time, Nick. Thank you.
I always enjoy talking with Phil, and we talked a little bit about this, but Phil coaches leaders, and I'm telling you, you will not find a better coach than Phil Bell. So if you're thinking, hey, I need to get a coach who's going to help me get to the next level in leadership, help me get our ministry to the next level, but he's really going to help you specifically and your church. And it's like, you're going to be doing all of that. And he's just kind of there coaching you along. I mean, you're not going to find a better person than Phil. So I'd encourage you to reach out to him if that's the case. As far as this interview goes, a few of the action items I thought about are probably obvious. Get the book, right? Read that, gather a team to implement it with you though. That's number 2, because just like most things we talk about in this podcast, you can't do that by yourself. I would encourage you to mix that team up with staff, volunteers, parents, and get a diverse collection there of folks. And then the simple thing that we can all do, even if it's not getting the book and just trying to implement this whole strategy, is the third thing. Talk with and listen to one parent this week. I mean, so much of what we want to create with strategy could just miss what is really needed. And we would find that out if we had a conversation with one parent. So I encourage you to do that. You can get all the links and notes at nickblevins.com/episode 237. Don't forget to sign up for the Multiply Ministry Conference, just 2 weeks away when this episode comes out, multiplyministry.org, or go to ministryboost.com and then click on the banner there for Multiply Ministry. So I hope you'll be there, and I hope you'll subscribe so you never miss one of these episodes, and I'll catch you in episode 238, the next one on the Family Ministry Podcast.
Thanks for listening to the Nick Blevins Family Ministry Podcast. We hope this helps you maximize your church's potential. We would love to hear stories of how you apply what you've learned. You can do that by leaving a comment on iTunes or in the show notes at nickblevins.com.